and welcome back to another episode of Mind Body Series with your hosts, me, Katie McMullen, and Marin Phoenix. We are delighted to have you with us again for our fourth episode, where we're going to explore the mind-body connection in a deeper way. And we're going to share some of our philosophies, our understanding of how the mind and the body truly do speak to each other. They are reflections of one another. And if this seems like new information to you, you are not alone. And we are excited to open up this conversation for you to explore what might be possible. So what do you say? Let's get started. So first, I'd like to ask you, how are you? How are you? Can you ask this question to your body? Maybe you close your eyes, and I'll ask it one more time. And whatever first word, first reaction comes to mind or to your body, acknowledge that. So with your eyes closed, how are you? What do you say, Marin? What's coming up for you today?
How often do you actually check in with your body? On a day-to-day basis, we're running around, we're taking care of our children, we're going to work, we're going to school, whatever it is that we're doing. How often do you actually stop and lovingly, compassionately say, how are you doing? How are you, body? And then one step further, how often when we get a response do we actually listen? So if our body responds with, well, I'm a little thirsty right now, or like I'm a little dehydrated, or I'm hungry, you haven't fed me yet today, PS, right? Or I'm lonely, or whatever it is, I'm exhausted, I'm overtired. How often do we actually pause, hear that message, and then take action on behalf of our body? As opposed to, think about how often you receive external messages of people asking you for things, of other people's needs, and how often, how responsive we are to other people's needs.
Yes. How often do we usually check in with our bodies, and what are the messages that we're normally getting? There are some that we are all very familiar with. Some really obvious messages would be a hunger cue, right? If we haven't eaten in a little while, are we acknowledging and observing enough to feel the rumbling in the stomach? Or for some of us, me included, might be something more like hangry, when your mood changes and your tone gets a little bit sharper, or you start to get more easily frustrated on the drive home or in your meeting, or maybe you push through it, because that's a lot of the time the response that has been programmed into us in our society, that if we work harder, push past it, that no pain, no gain type of response to something that we're doing, whether it's a physical, workout, or it's something more mental, or even in our relationships.
Oh, Katie, that piece is so important about the way that we're conditioned to relate to our body and this pushing through it. Most of the messages that we get from our body, we can push through in some way, right? We can take a medication, we can take a pill, we can do something to override our system until we can't. And that's what we're going to talk about next is how are we in rapport with our body, and what does that actually look like? So I'm going to have you put yourself into a more familiar relationship. Think about being in a relationship with your spouse or your best friend or your children, someone that's close to you, right? And imagine that you are talking to this person, you say, hey, something's kind of bothering me. Something's come up between us that is bothering me a little bit. And imagine your spouse or your friend says, you know what? I am just like way too busy right now. Here, like have a cupcake. Like just go over there because I need to do my thing. I'm just way too busy for this. And so you go off and you eat your cupcake and maybe read your book and go, okay, well, all right, I'll try again another time, maybe when she's less busy. And then you go back, or you go back to your spouse or this person that you're close with, and you say, hey, so there's something that's actually still bothering me that I would really love to talk about with you. Like maybe you're a little more insistent this time. Maybe you're tapping them on the shoulder, being a little bit more like, hi, this is actually really important. And they say, oh my God, did I not already say? Like, I can't deal with this right now. I just have way too much going on. Like, you need to just go away. At what point? I mean, we all can imagine what happens if this dynamic continues. Imagine that your husband or your wife or your partner or your best friend continues to give you that message. You're not important. I'm too busy. I can't deal with this. That feeling, imagine that feeling building within you. Like, we need to talk about this. Where does this go? What eventually happens? Most of the time, there's an explosion, right? We are like, this is not okay. At some point, we lose it. You're not listening. So we can think about this with the body as this experience of your body is giving you a signal saying something we can all relate to. Hey, I'm hungry. At first, it's kind of like, I'm hungry. Or even, here's a different one. Imagine you're on a road trip. Like we can all relate to being on a road trip and suddenly you're like, okay, I think I'm going to need to pee in like 30 minutes. I can feel that this is coming through, but I don't really need to go right now. So you've got this in the back of your mind. But then 30 minutes goes by and you're like, oh man, I really need to pee, but you're stuck in traffic. Okay. When I get to the off ramp, I will pull off. But you're moving at a snail's pace. And by the time you get off the off ramp and finally find that gas station, you are beside yourself. Like, oh my gosh, I'm actually in pain. I have to pee so bad, right? Or go to the bathroom. And this is the same thing. Like we have our body will keep giving us a signal until it gets to the point where that signal has to be so big that we finally stop and listen. And a lot of times that shows up as an injury or a big illness, or just some other kind of expression of everything has to stop here. One way to think about this is feather brick truck. Okay, so the first sort of like, hey, something's going on that's not working here is like the feather. We get these little signals from our body. Maybe we get a rash, or maybe we have a little bit of a headache, right? When we ignore these signals, these messages for our body that something's up, something's a little bit off, we can end up with brick, right? A brick, something, if you throw a brick through a window, it's pretty hard to ignore. It's there. You can definitely tell something is happening. Truck is when we ignore the brick and our body sends us a signal that brings our life to a crashing halt, where we are not able to move forward in the way that we have been. Everything has to stop. And we have to, and we're almost forced to evaluate our life, to look at what's going on and to completely stop and be with whatever's happening in our body. So, Featherbrick Truck, how would you like to be in relationship with your body? So, if you're imagining coming back to this, being in relationship with your spouse, how would you like to be in relationship with your spouse? How would you like your spouse to treat you, your partner, your best friend? Same thing, bringing that back to the body. What kind of relationship would you like to have with your body?
I like this concept of feather brick truck because in our language, when someone gets a cold, a really bad cold, they come into work and you say, hey, Bobby, how are you? And he goes, man, I feel like I've been hit by a truck. That's actually truly in our language. And probably Bobby should have stayed home that day to rest and digest and to heal. Because when we slow down, not only do the messages start to come through, we can listen a little bit better, but that's what the body's asking for. If we're getting somewhere between the brick and the truck. The truck is like that full stop. So I want to share a story about how the teeth relate to the step between the feather and the brick. The mouth is representative of the first part of your digestion, right? We chew things first. Sometimes in our language, we say, let me chew on that for a little bit when we have a big concept that we're not quite ready to make a decision on because it's new and we need to sit with it or to chew on it. And so the teeth would be a representation of the first part of that digestion process physically when we eat something. We chew it, the saliva moves it around. It's great, beautiful, and it's natural. This could also be symbolic of when we're digesting something emotional or an experience that's happened to us or for us now or in a past part of our life. So I had a client come in and we were doing some biomagnetism. It was his first time in, he didn't know what to expect. And so I explained about being a detective for the body using energy testing. And I found a bunch of things, including a couple of magnetic pairs for some of his teeth, because the teeth are the first place that we can look for messages about something that's going on more deeply. It's like your first warning signal, actually, when we get a toothache. And so I didn't know this gentleman, he didn't know me, and we did the whole session, and then I told him what I found. And I said, I just want you to know that I placed some magnets around, the teeth. I think it was maybe in the upper right. I can't remember. And he said, that's funny because I've had toothaches there for the last 2 weeks. And I'm like, isn't that funny? Let's look at my traditional Chinese medicine chart and see what emotions and organs those teeth correspond to, because the beautiful ancient practice of Chinese medicine has mapped out um, how each tooth corresponds to different organs in the body, different systems and emotions. And so we talked about it, and the teeth that came up for him were associated with anger. And when I presented him this information, he was like, oh my goodness, I have been so mad, so frustrated, and I haven't been able to express it, but it's really been building and building. And so we were able to have a conversation around that because of what we found in the body as a message. We um, we talked about it, and then I also sent him home with some energy medicine yoga techniques to help process that, because if we're not able to process that right in the moment, which sometimes it's not appropriate or we don't know how, then that's when we can bring in some of the tools to make sure that it does, in a really healthy way, start to move through the body. And it takes time. Everything happens in its own process. But how fascinating is that to have a message coming from the teeth? And I'll tell you right now, I have a couple of different teeth charts saved on my phone. And if I get a toothache, I've been doing this for a couple of years now, I immediately go to that chart, and then I can get curious and say, one, do I need to floss? And two, what emotion is coming up for me? And am I feeling that in that area of my body with the associated organ? And it has been so spot on every single time. And my dentist keeps telling me how healthy my teeth are. And I'm also not, I don't live in that state of fear when I have a toothache, because I'm realizing that there's a message there. And so I'm able to use some of the tools from the body mapping to get curious instead of getting scared.
This is what I love about body mind mapping, is that, or just this relationship between the body and the mind, is that there's so much hidden wisdom just sitting there waiting for us. And most of the time, we're not conditioned to receive or to look for this kind of wisdom. So, one thing that I think is important to talk about here is, why would we want to have a relationship with our body? Why would we want to use body mind mapping? Katie gave a great example of an experience where this gentleman was having tooth pain, and in looking at what the root cause might be behind that tooth pain, that allows us to have faster healing. That allows us to move through injury, illness more quickly, and to often prevent a recurrence. One great example of how using this body mind mapping, how using this deeper look into what is happening with our body, is a story about a friend of mine who I got to walk beside her through our coaching trainings and witness her completely shift out of thyroid disease. Okay, so this woman, she had been diagnosed with and on medication for thyroid disease for 30 years, over 30 years. And as we were learning these tools of body mind mapping, of understanding this deep, deep connection between the subconscious, between our patterning, between how we're showing up in the world, what the beliefs that we have, and how we're living our life, and what's happening, what's showing up for us in our body, as we're exploring this, she was exploring her thyroid disease. Now, thyroid disease, very simply, not to get too deep into it, there's a connection between thyroid disease and enjoying the sweetness of life. And this was something that she really had not been allowing herself, something that was difficult for her, something that was challenging. And as she worked with these deeper patterns and as she started to shift, make changes in the way that she led her life and the way that she showed up and the beliefs of what was possible and who she is, that she could enjoy. And this goes deep. So this is like such a high level look at what she went through with that deep coaching. After 6 months, she was able to go off her thyroid medication completely and hasn't gone back since. And when she told her doctor, I think I'm good. I think I don't need my thyroid medication anymore, because, just side note, all of this body mind mapping, it works in concert with modern medicine. So really important point, make sure that you are doing this in a balanced way with your medical care provider, right? So what she did is she went to her doctor, her medical care provider, and said, hey, I think I'm good and I can go off my thyroid medication. He ran all of her tests, and sure enough, she was completely clear. She did not need the medication anymore. She was able to go off of her medication and hasn't gone back since. And she's having a completely different experience of life that is more enjoyable. She's getting that sweetness out of life and she is soaking up every minute of it. This is an example of how powerful bringing these tools, bringing these body mind mapping tools, looking at this deeper connection can be in moving through illness, injury, or even a major life change or experience. So bring back to Katie, because Katie is going to tell us a little bit about what is body mind mapping. We've heard this, the mind body connection. We've heard about body mind mapping, but what actually are we talking about when we use these words?
So sometimes the body might seem like a mystery, kind of like how the world felt before we mapped it all out with navigation and exploration, truly. And there are different systems and schools of thought that have body-mind maps where we correlate certain experiences and emotions to manifestations of symptoms that are expressed in the physical body. So you can imagine if something is manifesting on the physical level, so in the dense, the 3D world, it had to have started somewhere else, somewhere further back, somewhere perhaps energetically or emotionally. I like to use the example of when you have a thought or an idea for a project or a new career, it starts in your head, right? It starts as something that's unseen, not tangible, and then you start to speak it. You speak this idea into the world. You tell your friends, hey, I have this really cool idea and I want to create this piece of art. I want to build something. I want to go here. And then as you start to speak it, it becomes more and more real, so much so that you actually will use your hands to go book that flight or to make that dish. And suddenly the thought that you had is now right in front of you in the physical world. And the same thing can happen with our stuck energy, our stuck emotions and experiences, whether it's something going on, crisis, current, acute kind of experience, or something from the past that has been building or went undigested and got stuck in your energy bodies and in your physical tissues. because every time that something happens to you or for you, every time you have an emotion, an experience, planned, unplanned, your biology has a biochemical reaction. And it started that reaction from the experience. So there's a correlation between the energy, the unseen thing that caused that emotion, and the physical experience within your body. So there are a lot of different maps out there, and there are overarching themes to each one. And Marin's going to share a more specific story about one of the nuances that we have in our legs.
Oh my gosh, yes. Katie, that was such a beautiful explanation of body mind mapping and how this can weave into our life and the biochemical physical response that's happening. So, when we're experiencing illness, injury, something that's going on, it's essentially our body is pointing out that it's revealing that there's some kind of disconnect between the way that we are perceiving reality versus what's actually happening in reality. And I'll tell you a story about right after my first child was born, and I was in ultra caretaking mode. And I had this beautiful newborn baby, and he was demanding 24/7 all of my attention. And I remember I was visiting a friend's house one day, and she had this steep staircase. And I went up the stairs to change my baby's diaper. And on my way downstairs, I was holding on to the railing on the way back down really tightly, very holding my baby in my other arm, mindful of being very careful as I was going down the stairs. As I got about halfway down, I started falling. And I was falling, my momentum holding my baby was so strong that even though I was holding onto the railing with my right hand, I kept falling forward. And of course I was like, don't drop the baby, don't drop the baby. So the way that I fell, I ended up going down the stairs on my left shin. And when I got to the bottom, I kept my baby safe between the railing and my shin, but I skinned all the skin off of my left shin. So, being a practitioner of this stuff, I immediately went to this body mind mapping. Left shin has to do with being a caretaker and taking great care of everybody else, but not taking care of yourself. And I had fallen into this practice, into this focus of taking care of my baby and my family and being so focused outwardly that I was neglecting myself, that I wasn't doing the things that I needed to feel nourished and to show up as my best self. And I got to tell you, this was not the first time that I hurt my shin. I actually had scars on my shin from all of the times when I had hurt it in the preceding weeks and months. And this was, talk about that feather brick truck. This was the brick. I had had the feathers. This was the brick telling me, hey, this willpower that I was exerting over, like with my perception of reality, that I'm a mama now, and so I got to take care of my baby, that I'm not important, was such a disconnect from reality, the reality that I was not taking care of myself. And this accident forced me to stop and really look at what was going on. And this is the thing, body mind mapping gives us a choice. It gives us a choice to look at what is happening in our life, to take that pause. Why is this coming up for us? Many of us have an injury or have some illness come up. And what's the first thought you think? Why is this happening to me? How many times do we say that? Why is this happening to me? Why did I fall down these stairs? Why me? Everyone else went up and down these stairs just fine. Why me? Okay. What if we shift that? Just play with this. The next time you stub a toe or you get sick, you get a cold, something happens, asking yourself just for a moment, why is this happening for me? What's deeper?
Whatever's happening in your body, in your mind, and even in your experience is happening for you. and you get to choose what to do with that information. Simply accepting, you know what, I'm okay with the message that I'm receiving. There's not always an action to take. The acceptance is also part of the healing. And oftentimes, along with acceptance, comes a letting go, which brings us back to the breath once again, where our breath is an example constantly, almost every second, every 10 seconds is a cycle of breath where we take something in and then we let it go. And generally the exhale is longer. The letting go it can take a long time. That's why grief is one of those emotions that sticks around, likes to hang out, can feel heavy, but it gets lighter and lighter as we learn to accept the new environment that has been created from that experience in the physical or in your world, in your relationships. And so right now, I would love to offer a very simple technique for tuning into that breath and for letting go and creating more of that acceptance. So I invite you to sit up nice and tall and take a deep breath in your nose and exhale out the mouth, making the sound like a snake, a hissing snake. S, 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 S. Let's do that 2 more times together. Feel the air moving between your teeth. Take another deep inhale in and allow the S to carry out your long exhale, letting go and moving towards acceptance, maybe even inspiration. This is a very accessible and easy breath practice, inhaling through the nose and exhaling the sound of S to help experience that in the physical body of letting go and slowly, eventually accepting and moving on to the next cycle. So we want to talk a little bit about how are you inhabiting your body? That's probably a question you've never heard before. So let's break it down with a little story here. I recently had a conversation with an older gentleman who I was doing biomagnetism for, and he really enjoys the process of taking apart motorcycles and putting them back together. He takes apart every single piece. He's been doing it for years, cleans every single piece, spends time with it, and then puts the whole motorbike back together. He also has a passion for fine art. And in fact, in his home, he has several really beautiful, large fine art pieces, sculptures, paintings. And so as we were chatting and I'm getting to know his story pretty well, there was a question that came to mind I really wanted to ask him. And so I said, do you see your body as a motorcycle or as a piece of art? And he closed his eyes and he took some time to reflect on it, probably 4 breaths. And he opened his eyes and said to me, I'm a motorcycle. And I said, I'm not surprised at all. A lot of us view our body as a machine, the language that we're using around our body, the way that we talk about how we move, feeling very mechanical. We can also look at our beautiful, beautiful designs of our human beings as vessels of art, really, of beautiful expression, the way that we're able to feel so deeply. And even the arc and the cycles of emotion and of healing, it's truly an art. It's a conversation between the physical, the emotional, the mental, and even the spiritual.
Katie, there's something so comforting about a machine, right? There's something so comforting in the idea of being able to take something apart and put it back together again. that there's someone that we can know how to, right, take something apart and put it back together again. There's a control aspect. There's a aspect of us that we want to be able to have some control over what is happening to us, over what we're experiencing. And on the flip side, right, when we're living in a world where we can have surprises, where there can be chaos and the unknown, right? What happens when you start to face the unknown? That can be a hard place to be. What I want to encourage you with is body mind mapping is a way to be in dialogue with this art form, to be in dialogue with this mystery in a way where, rather than the illusion of control, which we often have when we are in the mechanics point of view, where we can actually create deep, effective change. And there's that risk of looking into the unknown, of getting real with, if I look at things from this body mind mapping perspective, I might have to change if I want a different experience of life. When we take a pill, when we make a mechanical adjustment, we don't have to change. We get to carry on with the way things are. When we're talking about body mind mapping and going into what is your body asking from you, what is going to be, what belief or patterns of experience are coming up for you to expand the possibilities of your life, that might actually mean making a massive shift in the way that you're showing up. It might mean putting boundaries in with the people that you love. It might mean following your passion. It might mean allowing joy and pleasure back into your life. That can be a little bit scary. Ultimately, so rewarding. And I think I can speak for Katie. In our opinions, this is the point of living. This is truly living. Pull out, getting everything that you can out of life. And your body is here to help you get the most out of life. Your body is here to guide you into the highest, most authentic, fully expressed version of yourself. So, hope that gives you a little bit of a sense of what body mind mapping is, how this might look like, some stories so that you can see how this shows up in actual people's lives and what the possibilities are from tapping into these messages with your body. So if you're listening to this and you're trying out some of these exercises and you're hearing this story and you're thinking, I could never listen to my body in this way, I could never receive these messages, you can. Yes, you can. Just be patient with yourself. This is a process. It's not necessarily something that happens overnight. This is developing a relationship with your body takes time and a lot of grace and a lot of patience and a lot of love, just like any relationship in your life. And Katie and I are here to support you. So if you're curious, if you want to know more, please come ask us questions, talk to us, reach out via email. We would love to hear from you.
We want to make this body-mind mapping really accessible and easy for you right now. As Marin said, this is truly a practice and a journey, one that we both engage with every single day and have been for years. And so if you're just starting or if you've been doing this for a while, I would love to invite you to do this little exercise so that you can start deepening your practice and conversation as well. This is my favorite way to immediately drop into the message from your body that you need right now. Where are you at? So bring your left hand over your heart and your right hand over your belly and close your eyes. Take a deep breath in, feel the belly filling up underneath the right hand. Keep inhaling, feel the chest rising. Open mouth, exhale. And now, ask yourself, how am I? What does my body need right now? What message is my body trying to send? If these questions feel hard or your answers feel unclear, know that it gets easier as you keep picking up the phone. This exercise with the hand over the heart and hand over the belly is like picking up the phone and calling your best friend. And in this case, your best friend is your body, and it will always answer. It will always call you back, even leave you messages. And so to really open up that communication, we'll use some affirmations today, keeping your eyes closed. You can say it with me or repeat these mantras in your head. I am safe. I am listening to my body. I am safe to receive the messages from my body. I get to choose what to do with this information. My body is my best friend and wants to support me. My body wants to be healthy. My body is my ally. Take another deep breath in your nose. Hold the breath in at the top for just a moment and exhale deeply. Release your hands back to your lap. Blink the eyes open. Know that you can return to this very simple practice at any time. I do this in public. So it's very centering, even just for one breath, bringing the awareness of your physical body, really holding yourself. It immediately centers you and opens up that communication. So this is also why we are big advocates for breathing techniques and meditation, which are also offerings that Marin and I have on a regular basis, sometimes in groups, in workshops, and of course in our one-on-one private sessions with our clients. In our next episode, Marin and I are so excited to bring on a special guest to apply the theories that we've talked about today from the body-mind mapping. So join us then. Thank you so much for tuning in today. It's always a pleasure and an honor to share this space with you. Please let us know if you learned anything interesting or have a story of your own body-mind mapping experience. You can reach out to us via email in the show notes or leave a comment on our podcast. We can't wait to hear from you, and we'll see you next time.